Thank you. Okay. So thanks so much for joining us for our webinar on waste colonialism. Um, this is a really interesting term that I hadn't heard myself until fairly recently, but I think when I heard it being talked about in these terms, a lot kind of clicked into place for me. And I've done a bit of research on it in the past few weeks and I suppose past few months, and I really feel like there's some sort of some concepts here that are really useful in exploring um, waste and kind of how our waste moves around the world through this lens of or framing it as colonialism. But basically, by the end of this evening, I want you to feel like you can better explore waste as an ethical issue and as a kind of a global issue. And specifically, when I'm talking about that, I want to do a bit of an activity I've been developing that will help us to link our waste management, I suppose, in Ireland to some of the impacts it might have on countries in the global south, and using concepts like power and extraction and oppression. I've misspelled oppression. Well done, Alex. Um, I want to hold a space for teachers to share with other teachers, maybe tools and resources that you've used in the past. And I have a few that I'm bringing to the table as well, but tools that you might use to help your students explore this topic. And then we're going to finish the session with looking at some ways in which students might take action for solidarity with some of the people who express some of the perspectives that we're going to see over the course of the next 90 minutes or so, 80 now. So that's kind of my plan for the day. And thanks everybody who has already introduced themselves in the chat. And if you've just come online, feel free to introduce yourself as well. It's lovely to know a bit who's in the room. Just to say as well that I'm sure many of you are very familiar with global citizenship education, and sort of this framing and understanding waste through the lens of justice in particular is very much in line with our global citizenship education program at GAP. And there's the definition there, but I've kind of highlighted for me some of the ones that are really coming out around kind of challenging stereotypes and sort of rethinking things that we think we already know. Maybe from a different perspective, supporting people to think a little bit more independently, and linking, that kind of big picture global justice stuff to your lives. And then there's that piece around kind of action again, as well as also highlighted. This webinar is sponsored by funded by Worldwise Global Schools, and you can find a lot more really, really great stuff. And there's a great resource library on their website as well, and their teacher's handbook as well, which is another really, really good piece of thing at worldwiseschools.ie. So I strongly recommend that if you're not familiar with it already. So yeah. I would like to maybe start by orienting ourselves to the topic a little bit, and also kind of pinning and kind of connecting and finding where it might be within the curriculum. So just quite a simple activity to start. And in the bottom left of the screen, hopefully, if I've done my job right, you should see a little pen logo that helps you to annotate something. And when you click on that pen logo that says annotate, you should be able to click on a text button and then write some, if I'm doing it right then, write some text just there. Aoife is already on it. Brilliant. Excellent work, Aoife. Thank you. I just want you to take a second and think about this concept of waste. What comes to mind when you think of waste? And it might be, maybe it's a definition of waste, but it might be some objects that come to mind. Maybe it's a phrase that uses the word waste or something like it. Maybe you have some images that sort of conjure up when you're thinking about this concept. Brilliant, John McGee. You can absolutely click on the T sign to write text. There might be some feelings, or maybe you kind of think of a place somewhere near you as well. So take a moment, think about waste. And if you're finding it difficult to write in the text, feel free to pop it in the chat and I can add it myself. So what comes to mind when you think of waste? Excellent, thanks, John. Really great. Thanks so much. So coming in hard and fast. And feel free to keep exploring this idea as well, because it's quite a powerful idea, this idea of waste. Maybe just a few more seconds. If you've got any ideas, pop them in the chat.
I can't spell obsolescence.
Neither could I, John. Don't put me on the spot. But I have you there. Um, let's try. Maybe something like that. Cool. So yeah, feel free to keep popping them in there. But some of the images that you've talked about then are bags of unwanted clothes. Kind of images maybe include rubbish and trash. We've got sort of images in our minds of landfills, like the one I started the session with. Um, Maybe some people kind of go to things like over packaging in supermarkets. Um, there's a lot of touching on consumption. Somebody here wrote around the leftovers from overconsumption, and I think that's really really interesting as well. That that I suppose waste is what is remaining when we are in some way done with something. Um, and I suppose one of the things that we might be touching on is that actually maybe one man's waste, like here's another idiom, but one man's waste is another man's. Not sure how that finishes, but when we think about international waste shipping companies that are bringing waste around the place, or businesses that collect waste, there is also profit in waste as well. So really interesting to sort of see, waste is only waste when you view it from one perspective or another. Um, Unnecessary, I think, is yeah, we kind of put those words together quite a lot, don't we? Unnecessary waste. Um, Things like a waste of time or a waste of money, just feels like it's being careless or something about it. There's some really nice feelings around here around the guilt and the responsibility for my own consumption. And I think this is a really, really interesting one that's been coming up for me quite a lot as well about how do we teach about um, complex topics like this that we're really deeply wrapped up in, um, like while sort of honoring that guilt, but maybe also not kind of uh, making it more heavy or making it a blocker to sort of doing something meaningful about it. Um, we've got effects on animals. We've got yeah, images of recycling bins as well. Some really thanks, John, for sharing Ghana. And we are actually going to go to Ghana figuratively before the end of the session as well. So that's yeah, really valuable contribution there as well. Um, so okay, I'm just going to download this because I'm going to keep that and add that um, to the slides before the end. And I'm going to just get rid of those. So thank you so much for all of those. And when I send out the slides, then all your lovely words will be there on this page as well. Um, so I think all of those images and all of those things are there when we're thinking about waste. For me, when I'm thinking about this term waste colonialism, I found a few different definitions that I found quite interesting. Sort of maybe kind of a very surface level definition was one I found around moving waste from high GDP countries to low GDP countries. The author here in this piece goes on to unpack it a lot more, but sort of as a sentence definition, I thought that was quite interesting. That definition kind of was cited from this second definition, who kind of includes the ideas of that it's waste moving from places of privilege and affluence to areas with lower economic status and influence as well. So kind of even there, you're starting to kind of you're taking GDP perhaps out of the equation a little bit and more kind of focusing a bit more on things like privilege and power in that as well. My favorite definition, and obviously it's a little bit longer, was this from a Break Free from Plastic report. And actually, everything in here is all the links are active. So when I send these slides out to you, if you're interested, you can go down a bit of a rabbit hole. But this Break Free from Plastic report, I think, was really good in exploring how it's the practice of exporting waste from higher income countries to low income countries, which are often ill equipped to handle this waste. So you know, maybe some of the justification, as we'll see, is that we don't have the capacity to recycle certain plastics in Ireland, but we export them to other countries. But often those countries also don't have the capacity to handle those waste, and that this Break Free from Plastic report also highlights these the power dynamics that are involved in where the waste moves around, um, and uh, and also kind of says that yeah, it's typically the global north that is exporting those, and then to countries in the global south that are often receiving those as well. Um, and just this last sentence really got me, is externalizing their waste problem to other countries by using the waste recipient's land for disposal. And I think that really kind of helped me kind of click that into perspective, right? That, when we're sending waste to another country or to another context, I mean, not just land, but water and air as well. But we're using the space perhaps as landfill in those countries where when plastic waste or clothes waste is going into those environments, essentially it is a dumping ground for some of our for the things that we have and have finished with, I suppose, as well. And it was this word land that really got me, because as I was reading around about this in advance of today's session, um, I came to I was kind of really connecting these ideas of waste and land quite a lot. And there's this really, really interesting article I was reading around that kind of goes into some of the etymology of the word waste. And as I understand it, the word waste initially applied to land in this context, this idea of land being perhaps despoiled and empty of its contents, but also maybe kind of empty and unused, maybe unfit for use, or perhaps not put to, kind of a sense of economic productivity, perhaps. And also kind of tied in with this is some of these ideas of kind of colonialism in the old-fashioned kind of sense, if you like, the kind of Christian sort of not the yeah, sort of kind of Spain, Catholic Spain in 1600s. We're talking about, I suppose, this idea of maybe the doctrine of discovery was one that kept coming up for me. This idea that we have that we discover this land with its terra nullius, that's unused, that's unexploited, and when we arrive there, we can put it to use, and so the land is no longer wasted. And I just wanted to contrast that kind of concept of waste with a definition of land from Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's a botanist and a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. Apologies if I've mispronounced that. But in her amazing book Braiding Sweetgrass, she talks about how land is everything. She says the identity, the connection to our ancestors, the home of our non-human kinfolk, our pharmacy, our library, the source of all that sustains us. Our land was where our responsibility to the worlds is enacted. And I suppose I want to maybe just take a second and kind of hold those two concepts together of land that is maybe seen as waste by one group of people and land that is seen as everything by another group of people. And I don't know, is there any sort of reactions? Does that trigger anything for anybody in the room? Okay, if not, feel free to speak up and jump in here. It's just that was it's really vibrant for me, these two ideas, kind of holding them together a bit. But we'll go and maybe kind of expand on that and explore it a bit more as we move forwards. Um, just to really kind of tie into the curriculum, because obviously very, very important to teachers who are working in classrooms, where and how might we talk about waste colonialism? This is by no means an exhaustive list, but this is just some of the places where I found waste colonialism, as I understand it, and we'll explore it this evening, resonates with the curriculum. Business studies talks about ethical and sustainability issues that are arising from the consumption of goods. There's a lot about globalization in there. Um, Thanks, Eilish. Just kind of in relation to that last point you were saying around this so-called wasteland needs to be controlled and domesticated and put under power. That land that isn't economically productive and being used for something is waste. Is a really yeah a really well complex and difficult idea. In CSPE, we can kind of explore how they're connected to ecosystems and people and places near and far, along with a few other things there. I was really surprised to find it in biology around waste management, the problems associated with waste disposal. In politics and society, environmental justice is really one of the kind of very key ideas, I suppose, that we're, excuse me, relating to here as well. Just turn this off. So, yeah, so there is sort of spaces within the curriculum to maybe you know the curriculum probably better than I do, but there's definitely spaces to kind of explore and connect with there as well. Um, so I've done enough talking. I'd like to. How many people have we got in the room? We've got about, okay, we can do three of these. Um, so I'd like to share with you an activity I've been working on. I trialed it at the Worldwise Teacher Conference a couple of weeks ago, and got generally quite good reception to it. Yeah, no, I'm quite excited to share this with you. We'll be using a tool called Canva, which you may or may not be familiar with it. I've had some success with online whiteboards in the past and some difficulties, but hopefully this isn't something that we can mess up too badly. But basically, what I have here is I suppose it's kind of like a pathway, or I suppose a kind of maybe a post-consumer pathway in which this might happen to something to a piece of clothes, or I have a different one for plastics. I'll get, because we've got eight, I'll work with one group around clothes and another group around plastics. But basically, um, here on this side, we as consumers dispose of clothes perhaps in a recycling shop, charity shop, or in one of these clothes bins. Um, and then everything, each arrow points to something that might happen further down the post-consumer pathway. And spoiler alert, we're getting into to countries like Ghana, John, further down this way as well. But what I'm going to ask you to do, in a second, I'm going to put you into two breakout rooms. So you'll be working with three other people. And I'd just like you to, I would say, sorry, to just to be more clear there. And oh, one, oh, no, that's right. Sorry. So I'm going to have, I've got these three, sorry, you can change between the two activities. Down here in the bottom right corner, there's a grid view. If you just click on the grid view, I'll just delete these because there's only this many people, and we'll delete this one as well. And so if you're in breakout room one, I'd like you to work with clothes, one. And if you're in breakout room two, I'd like you to work with plastics. And basically, I want you to look at each of the create this pathway. So the first thing you might see is that plastic is put in your home recycling bin. And you'll say, oh, well, maybe what happens after that? Well, there's four maybe things that could happen there. So it's going to be something in Ireland. Plastics are turned into something new in Ireland. You just click on the piece of paper and bring it over to here. And that's good because I haven't put that to the back, but anyway, I won't. So yeah, so click and drag those into the places that you think they fit. Any questions about what I'm asking you to do here for the next little while? That's amazing. Just then, I'm going to give this about 15 or 20 minutes because I think this is quite important that we have a good grounding of the knowledge about what's happening in the system. And After you've completed that, I'll be hopping between the breakout rooms, and after you've done that, you might find some time to discuss some of these questions or to respond to it in some way. I'm offering you these discussion questions as a way to kind of explore this a little bit more with your group. But obviously, if there's other reactions or other insights or anything that you want to share with the rest of your group, that would be really great. So, but for the next about 15 or 20 minutes, I'll let you work together with these. Any questions before I pop open the breakout rooms? Okay, grand. Then in that case, I will open those and I'll be hopping between the two. Oh no, you need the link, don't you? Oh, I nearly forgot to do that. Um, Here we go. There's the link. Cool. So you should be able to access that now. That's in the chat. And excellent. I see people joining, and I'm going to open those rooms and I'll be hopping between them. So I'll be there if you need me. So thanks so much, everybody, for those amazing conversations. I was really happy to be a little fly on the wall and hearing some tidbits of where that was going. So I really, really appreciated it. I want to give us a second to maybe share some of the insights and some of the things that you talked about in your different groups. But I thought I might just take this opportunity to maybe kind of do a bit of a grounding activity. And this is something I've learned recently is kind of a really useful way when you sort of when things have been kind of going, yeah, quite strongly, and you've been talking about some of these big topics. Maybe sometimes it's just nice to check in with your body, and to just take a second to do that. So if you want to, maybe you feel free to turn the cameras off. If you want to close your eyes, or if you want to just focus on something that's not directly a screen for a second, and just take a second to breathe in deeply. Take one really big deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. So breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. One more time, in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just take a second to think a little bit about where did you feel that conversation? Was it in your head? Or did you have your head fizzing with ideas and making connections? What did that feel like? Maybe it was in your shoulders, in your neck. Was there what's the feeling that's there now? What was the feeling during that conversation in your shoulders and in your neck? And just moving your scanner, your bodily scanner down a little bit lower. What's going on in your chest? Is it tight or is it breathing easily? Scanning a little bit lower, thinking about your stomach. What's happening there? Is it tense or is it excited? Is it hungry maybe? And then just moving on down through your legs. How are they feeling? Scanning a little bit lower down to your feet. Are they feeling connected to the ground? And what's that like? Just take a second to check in with your body. Maybe take one more deep breath. And when you're ready, feel free to come back into the room. Um, I'd love to hear maybe a snippet of the conversations from both rooms, because I think there's some really interesting points that were made around both of them. And obviously, you were room one, you were working around um, no, room one, you were working around clothes and clothes waste, and room two, you were working around plastics. So just maybe for room one, what were some of the things that came up in your group? What were some of the insights? Was there anything that you were surprised by? Was there anything that you were motivated by?
I think as a group we were kind of all surprised by the number of different outcomes of like where textiles go in Ireland, like them getting not just like the repurposing or going to the global south, but also the being burned for energy, being turned into new material, or going into landfill, just and then just kind of the breakdown of that kind of just the whole process was surprising, I think. And then we discussed about the power being more with global north and how the global south just has to kind of take what's left, and that there needs to be maybe governmental regulation. We talked about responsibility of product and production, like from the beginning, like whose responsibility is it? And I feel like we touched on a few other things, but does anyone else want to chime in? I don't remember everything. That was one of the main things we discussed. And then engaging the students in a meaningful way, difficulties that surround that.
Thanks, Shayla.
Well done, Shayla. You did very well there.
Oh, cool. Really, really great whistle-stop tour. Maybe we'll hear from the second room and see if anything resonated about what the first group said, and then maybe kind of draw some bigger conclusions there. What came up in the second room? Did you kind of touch on any of their topics? Were the similar things surprising? Or
I guess some of the things that I found kind of surprising there was the amount of the percentage of incinerated plastics in Ireland. 71% of plastic is incinerated in Ireland, and then in the EU, you only have 8.7% is of plastic produced is recycled. So I thought that was kind of fascinating in itself. And then we talked about the power. We kind of thought that the receiver countries had far less power. The citizens there probably had far less power than the citizens in our own countries who are giving the plastics and the waste. So that's kind of what we discussed. And then we got on to talking about the return scheme as well. We thought that. And then I think Aisling was saying something there. Is Aisling gone? Yeah, okay. That was it then.
so something that came up in both your conversations is this idea that receiving countries or countries in the global south have less power and less kind of capacity to change this system. Um, I guess I've got a lot of questions about that. Why is that, and where is the power to change this if not there, or to challenge or shift this somehow?
Is it because the monetary value of receiving all this waste is that when they receive the waste they get money for it, and they need the money more than we need it? Is that something?
Hmm.
Imagine there must be some reason why the country would take it. I mean, a boatload of waste, like waste. Why would you take it? Unless there is some kind of whatever. I mean, I just mentioned in our group there that I was looking for a campaign or some kind of action our students could take in school around clothing industry, and sorry to repeat this to group one, I'm afraid, but it just was curious. Greenpeace had I spotted one. We're doing a petition around the government ministers in Ghana to ask them to stop taking the stuff or think again about and it's interesting how from that we would be asking for another government to say, look, don't do this, and which obviously is a lot of thought behind it. I'm sure there is, but it's kind of it's how to get from here to there, that stage of getting stuff on the boats, getting wrapped up, getting them waste, and then getting them there, and for us having to get another government to say don't take your waste. I don't know. It's puzzled me, but it's I can see where it's coming from, but it's kind of unusual. I just felt it was an unusual thing to. I mean, maybe the stopping should be further back on the line, rather value chain, rather than having to be at the on the ship coming into Accra, or whatever. Accra, I should say, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
It would
totally.
seem
And
to, sorry.
yes, sorry, go for it,
Oh
Eilish.
no, sorry. I it just would seem to me that there must be, I don't know much about this at all. That's why I'm here, but it would seem to me that there must be something that can happen at at state level, at least, in terms of regulation, like maybe the EPA maybe might put some kind of regulation on the what waste can, what the extent to which, say, clothes waste or plastics waste can be incinerated, or like even as we talked about in our thing, the whole return scheme. And then surely at EU level, there must be something around trade, the World Trade Organization. But then, like, so we know that an awful lot of countries are disempowered within these transnational kind of decision-making systems, not like completely disempowered, but disproportionately disempowered in terms of who gets to make decisions. We know that commercial operators have and kind of corporations have massive power, even at COP. The influence that they have over kind of environmental discussions. So somebody's making money off this, and I suppose one of the key things is often finding out who's making money from it, and what are the regulations around it.
Hmm.
And anyway, sorry, I'm only thinking out loud, but I
No,
imagine,
Mm.
as you were saying, John, I imagine there must be like rafts of levels at which things like this,
Mm.
like this waste
mhm.
colonialism needs to be addressed. You know what I mean? There's probably no simple solution, but
No,
multiple ways of addressing it.
In both your
Sorry, I'm only thinking
conversations, you
out loud.
said,
My
no, no,
apologies.
thanks. No, really, really important contributions, Eilish. Thank you. And in both your conversations, you said that the receiving countries of this waste have less power in the relationship than the sending countries. And also, yeah, John, it does feel a bit strange to sort of say, well, to kind of put the responsibility on governments in receiving countries when they sort of have negotiating from a position of weakened power. Kind of Eilish's point makes me wonder, why hasn't the Irish government or the EPA stopped these systems of exporting our waste to global South countries? What's behind that?
Probably money making or something. I think some of these systems of oppression have been in place for a long time, and it's all kind of business as usual. And I think maybe sometimes people they don't think about these things because it's just like, oh, it just goes away and then it's out of your mind. Obviously that's on a personal level, but I think at a governmental level, like it's just the way it's been done, and maybe there's just no, unless someone's pushing it, like why would they want to go and do extra stuff when no, it's not.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I wonder, can we write it off as if we don't deal with it here,
Mm.
then does it appear in our carbon emissions? Or, you know what I mean?
Mm.
I
That's a
wonder.
really interesting question. Is that sort of part of the creative carbon accounting?
Yeah, that's what thank you. Yeah. I don't know. Is it? I
Mm.
don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a
Mm.
very, very good question.
Or how much is it worth? I mean, surely they're making money somewhere.
Mm. Yeah.
So if there's like a company that has like they're like, we have this contract to move this amount of clothes, and like if we don't get our amount of clothes in our contract, then I don't know. I'm not a business person. I'm making things up, but I just,
No, but there is interesting insights
yeah.
there. So until 2019, a lot of Ireland's plastic waste was processed in China. China was finding for, poor air quality, like lots of it kind of escaping into natural environments. So China took a decisive move to shut that down. But part of the reason that China was processing it was that, you have goods being manufactured in China going over by container ship over to, say, Ireland, for example, and then obviously making the return journey as well with these big empty crates. And one of the things that maximize that journey is filling it full of waste, filling it full of plastic recycling, shipping it back to China. So I think there is an economic dimension to you've solved a problem of getting rid of waste in Ireland, for example, and you've brought it over to China. When China closed down, interestingly enough, because sort of most of those routes were quite well established, it was other countries around Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam experienced quite a lot of this as well, where sort of the container ships were already going back, so it's kind of just redirected onto many of those countries as well. Similarly, in Ghana, a lot of the reason that Ghana ended up receiving a lot of clothes, as I read somewhere as well, is that there was sort of a missionary kind of tradition, or there was something during. I believe Ghana was a British colony, and during that time, sort of there was this a mandate for children to wear school uniforms and for sort of to wear business attire when going into work. But a lot of sort of there was this movement. Oh well, they don't have school uniforms, so let's send them over there as well. So kind of a lot of this kind of almost missionary incentive of like sort of sending secondhand school uniforms over to Ghana as a useful way to both get rid of them from Britain, but then also to promote to sort of meet what was perceived to be a need in Ghana, and then sort of because that route had been established, that kind of maximized, or was one of the contributing factors towards maximizing that flow as well. So yeah, I think kind of the way, as you say, Shayla, the way it's been done is part of it. I think also, Aoife, that there's definitely kind of an economic incentive, and then also just we've got all this waste piling up. What are we going to do with it? We can't dump, we can't put it in landfill because we've moved beyond that. So we need to do something with it, and it's very much kind of, for me, it's kind of case of out of sight and out of mind. Just before we move on, is there anything else that sort of was alive in you, or that one was that came up for you during your conversation? John was saying quite a lot about things to do with students, and I want to give some space to actually apply these conversations, because it's all well and good to sort of to have kind of a sense of how these global flows of waste and work, but what can you do in a classroom about it, and what can students do about it when they've learned something here? And I suppose I did a workshop quite like this at the Worldwise Global Schools event a couple of weeks ago, as I already mentioned. And some of the things that came up were around, so I asked kind of that exact question: what can you do with students? How can you engage students in this topic? And one of the things that we're saying around is sort of focusing on facts and statistics rather than kind of people who are saying opinions. There was a lot of kind of resonance for kind of telling good stories and comparing good practices and good examples of places maybe, or people who aren't engaged in this. Very complimentary to what Aoife was saying around researching the value of your bin. Could students do that? Can students figure out how much the classroom bin benefits someone? I don't actually know, but it would be a cool question to ask. How much is that worth to a waste exporter? Using walking debates and multiple choice questions to sort of challenge their knowledge, I guess, as well. One of the really great insights was around kind of systemic thinking, sort of really supporting people to see the system in the way that you kind of explored a little bit with that activity, thinking about why is it that big corporations are individualizing? Why are they saying you need to recycle when actually it's not really recycling, and in fact large amounts of the things that we put in the recycling end up in, or significant amounts end up in other places as well. So yeah, kind of this sort of being aware of this kind of individualization of response away from the systemic problems, and kind of in almost in contradiction to the first fact there was around kind of don't just look at statistics, but kind of focus in some way, if you can, on those kind of big systems and showing and exploring the flaws. whole school action is something I want to come on to now in a second, but kind of thinking about getting support from your school management, student-led competitions aiming to reduce waste or finding other ways to deal with waste other than putting that in the recycling. And they teachers that I was talking to were really, really motivated by stories of change and showing new ways to do things. Maybe students can come in with positive stories that they've found on social media around people who are doing things differently to this system, kind of taking action, something that's come up a couple of times there, and then maybe kind of focusing on topics that can be quite heavy and that you can be quite entangled with, but maybe working on those in short bursts. Practically, I've just got a couple of these activities that I'll share out with these. There's some cool uh, resources around. Well, this is something that came across my desk today. Greg Siegel's 7 Days of Garbage, where people are photographed with the rubbish that they produce over the course of 7 days, and I think the arrangement of those photos is really kind of evoking and quite powerful. I did a video lesson for the ISSN's Climate and Nature Summit around recycling, and there's a video lesson. There's a video lesson and a worksheet around that. There's quite a cool podcast called Vintage or Violence that I'd thoroughly recommend about the Ugandan clothes industry. Jonah Sullivan did this two-part report for RT News where she went to Malaysia and traced Irish plastic waste that was in Malaysia. You'll see like a photo of a Tato bag or something, I think, there, and really kind of exploring how we're related to that and crucially, what the Malaysian government are doing about it, or were doing in 2020. And then this movie as well, The Textile Mountain, Hidden Burden of Our Fashion Waste. So I was just wondering, do you, and obviously all these links are live, so you can have a closer look at them when you get them. But was there anything else that you used to teach about these topics, or anything else that's yeah, if you want to pop them in the chat, that would be amazing. Or you can just shout them out here and I can add them to the list.
That one I used as a BBC documentary, Stacey Dooley. She presents programs. She's done a pretty, kind of interesting place she's gone to in these documentaries. But she went to one on the Fashion is Dirty Secret. It was all about cotton and the water, uses water, and it's an interesting little thing. It's hard to get on YouTube though. I actually contact the producer and said, "Look, I can't get on YouTube anymore." Walking in, they gave me a link, a non-downloadable link that I can click on, but I can't download off the documentary. But it's a really interesting piece of work, and she does it in such a colloquial kind of way. She goes to factories out in Bangladesh and she sees all the waste going into the water, and they goes in a boat with some other local people, campaigners, and it's just, yeah, it's an interesting piece. It just fills in some gaps, around cotton particularly, and then she tackles some of the clothing manufacturers later in the documentary. It's a nice one. Fashion's dirty little secret.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm familiar with that. It's very good and cool that you have the download link. And if you were to share it with me, I wouldn't object, but no pressure.
Yeah.
If you want to keep those
Sorry, I
coming,
tried
yes.
to type something.
Yes, Eva.
I did a display a while ago on how much water are you wearing?
Oh, yeah.
We was trying to, I suppose, not create a shock element, but we used shredded paper and we made a male and female kind of outfit. And then on National Geographic, there is, I think, a video how much water is in t-shirts and jeans. And the students found it like they were shocked. Also, the River Blue documentary, it's very hard to get it though, is amazing on the textile industry and pollution.
Amazing. And that's around kind of dyeing or clothes dye.
Yeah.
If you want to keep those going into the chat, I'm conscious of the time and I want to wrap up at 8:30 exactly. But I found, just as I was going, I found this absolutely incredible video that I really, really want to share around action. It's about 5 minutes long. But what I want to do is, as you watch this video, there's people from a bunch of different contexts in the global south, in global south countries, who are expressing the kind of actions that they would like to see in relation to waste colonialism. So just please watch this, and if there's anything that comes up for you as ways that that might help you and your students to take action around this, then yeah, maybe just jot them down and we can share them afterwards. I just need to make sure that I am sharing my yeah, great. I need to make sharing my sound because otherwise you won't hear a thing. There we go, share sound. Cool. And we'll present this one here. Oop. And here we go. Can you hear that? Give me a thumbs up if you can.
We have seen the effects of waste colonialism in the African continent,
where our natural resources have been depleted to fuel corporate greed.
Where our resources are returned to us in the form of waste.
Oops, sorry.
I'm not seeing the video.
No, thanks,
I'm only
Shayla.
hearing it.
Thanks, Shayla.
Natural resources have been depleted to fuel corporate greed.
Where our resources are returned to us in the form of waste and cheap products made from toxic recycled materials.
Where plastic has infiltrated its way into our land, ocean, and physical bodies, severing our cultural connections with the earth,
and violating our rights to a clean and healthy environment.
As global South countries start closing their borders to this unjust practice of waste dumping,
we need to proactively guard against this happening in other parts of the world.
The global north cannot continue to export this waste problem to the global south.
All countries need to take responsibility for how they produce and manage their waste.
It's time for change.
We demand a transformation of our production,
consumption, and disposal model,
which have created this problem in the first place.
We demand that corporations take full responsibility for their products,
and that extended producer responsibility becomes a mandatory practice, prioritizing redesign, waste prevention, and setting up systems that make the disposal of waste redundant.
We demand that waste pickers, who have been providing an essential service without support or protection for too long, be given a central role.
We demand that corporations stop the double standards that encourage African governments to invest in false solutions,
like incineration, pyrolysis, and other harmful waste burning technologies.
We demand that the health and well-being of our communities be prioritized over profit,
and that African governments uphold their existing legislations to prevent the transfer of hazard waste to our country.
We need to move away from this loop of high mass production and consumption and return to the traditional indigenous practices of our people
that encapsulate principles of preservation and reuse.
We need solutions for Africa to come from Africa,
where local communities are an integral part in driving the solutions needed for their health and well-being.
We need our cities to draw from the expertise of waste pickers,
who are the leaders in waste management in many global South countries,
and form partnerships with them to create better jobs, better recycling and composting services,
and move away from unstable and expensive disposal systems.
We need our governments to protect the existing and new legislations that upholds our right of environmental justice
and safeguard the livelihood of local communities who face the most risk of waste pollution.
It is time to stop dumping waste in the global south.
We are not a dumping ground.
So I just wanted to maybe think about there's a lot of demands and a lot of not demands, but yes, demands and a lot of sort of ideas for action there. But what does that suggest for you and your students that might be actions that we could take in solidarity with the people who are speaking there?
I actually found that video very triggering for me watching that. And just seeing all of that. But yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Felicia.
I mean, I feel like, you know, a lot of what they're asking is like there are a lot of big picture things that are really great, like good solutions. But it is hard sometimes as an individual or students to try and visualize what that can be. Obviously, the first step is to talk about it and to be knowledgeable and educate ourselves. So maybe, you know, doing a deeper dive into what those things look like, what countries are engaging in these practices, what groups are engaging in it. And then, you know, a lot maybe through that, looking when you understand a little bit more about the specifics of it, maybe some more concrete ideas could come into view or be offered from the groups that are already doing this work. Yeah, it's hard to.
That's fair enough.
I think it'd be interesting for students to hear that, or to be aware of what actually the frustration is, rather than it being me or someone else saying, isn't it awful? To have people who are actually campaigning in some of the countries in Africa and see what they want, how they want things to be different. I think it just, many wouldn't know that, you know, so that's it. Even just showing that and discussing it, you're raising awareness. I know it doesn't solve anything, but it does. It's part of the process that for them to know. There's people who are bothered enough and say this is what's happened, and then maybe it links back to looking at what just happened to our waste, clothes waste, or where does it go, and that infographic we had to start, Alex. You know, how all the different stages and what's happening there, and how do I feel about all of that, and it's a whole learning process going on there, and you'd hope maybe that might lead to different perspectives on, you know, just to change behavior maybe in some small way, you know, maybe. I don't know. That's, yeah, very interesting video. Very interesting.
That's John.
Yeah, I think as John was saying, like it might force students to reevaluate and think what they purchased in the first place. You know, and ultimately where all of our stuff and products end up.
In terms of that, I suppose I've got I've found a few of kind of suggestions for ways that you might do all of the things or many of the things that you're saying there. Some of these come from my own head as well, and they might not be practicable in an Irish classroom, but I'm offering there to see, you know, I mean, just even at the very baseline, thinking about reducing your school's waste as being an act of solidarity with people who are experiencing, you know, who are receiving in countries that are receiving our waste. You know, Ireland being one of the biggest plastic creators in the European Union, or the biggest plastic producer in the European Union, and you know, so we have more capacity to reduce that waste and to send them to other countries. To stop, the less plastic waste we create, then the less plastic waste that gets shipped abroad. Investigating and reporting on recycling companies, investigating and reporting on plastic producers, finding some ways to advocate for change in a local supermarket. I always want to see these bulk bin things in supermarkets, you know, the ones that you see in health foods shops where you fill up your lentils or whatever. I'd love to see something like that, and you know, I feel like it can't be far away, but it could make a huge difference. That Voice campaign, A Letter a Day, has some really good ways that you might do that. The Irish School Sustainability Network have the Environmental Influencer course, and they've got lots of really cool resources about writing to politicians. You know, we were talking about getting in contact maybe with people on this side of the system and saying, well, why aren't we reducing the waste because of the things that are happening downstream? And so maybe kind of finding where that lever is. Is it somebody at the EPA, or is it somebody within our context. There's other cool, really cool things like the zero waste map. That GoZero.ie has a really cool zero waste map. So finding ways that you can meet some of the needs that you have by being a little bit more zero waste. Again, thinking about, like, you know, maybe it's not a new idea, but maybe by exploring this topic in terms of colonialism and sort of the effect that our lifestyles are directly having on people in other countries, maybe sort of you're adding an added incentive or a different way to explore and to understand that problem as well. Participating in and advocating for more circular economies, I think, is huge. And sort of related to that, if students are doing student projects in home ec or in woodwork or as part of the BT Young Scientist or the Young Social Innovators, can they incorporate this idea of decomposition within any of their projects? You know, that there is no waste at the end of whatever it is, the thing that they're designing as well. So just kind of really kind of centralizing and trying to foreground those questions of not creating waste as an act of solidarity. Did that trigger any ideas or anything that you were like, oh yeah, I want to do this? Or maybe they're impossible.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the advocating to the local supermarket for the refill or something. That's like just for myself to do too. You know, I think that's something that concretely could make a really big difference and wouldn't take that much effort on the supermarket's part. So
there was a campaign by Friends of the Earth, and maybe it was Voice as well, a few years ago, around like reducing plastic waste in supermarkets. And as I understand it, I might be simplifying it, but one of the responses that supermarkets made was to put in the sort of bins, like kind of places where you could put soft plastics, which was so close to getting it right, but also quite far away from getting it right as well. But you know, it shows that sort of there is, you know, sort of these kind of pressures maybe do have some kind of influence on supermarkets, maybe. I'm just going to wrap up. If there's anything else that's kind of vibrant, and I've noticed that there's been a few things that have been put in the chat, and those are really, really fantastic. Thank you so much. I've copied them all and kept them as notes on the side, and I'll add them to the presentation before I send them out. I want to just maybe pop in a feedback form to the chat as well, if you wouldn't mind kind of getting started on that. Feedback is really, really important to me. And I know that if you have it on a screen in front of you when we log off the call, then you're more likely perhaps to fill it out, and that is really helpful because it helps us report back to Worldwise Global Schools. So just to wrap up very quickly, I might kind of just hold some space for reflection, and just to think a little bit about. We use this head, hearts, and hands model to reflect on kind of some of these learning experiences. What's something interesting I've heard or I've thought in my head? With your heart, how have my feelings changed on this topic? And with my hands, what will I do with this knowledge? So I'll just give you maybe a moment to think about that. And if you want to share anything, that's amazing. And if not, also no pressure.
I just thought from what I learned today, it was just really interesting to see the breakdown of the how clothing waste is distributed around the world. It was a very like concrete, you know, logical way of looking at it that kind of put it into perspective. But then, you know, watching the video there was more like hitting on the heart, actually seeing like, you know the logical steps, and then having people talk about it, seeing the end results, seeing them speak so passionately with their hearts about how strongly this is affecting their lives really kind of put the real impact on, you know, what the logical scale was before. So yeah, I do with this knowledge, yeah, I think sharing with other people, but also, yeah, looking down the list of small actions and seeing, yeah, what I have in my wheelhouse for capable that I could do, like the letter writing to this is something I've already been trying to like, you know, try to hit up the supermarkets, try to reduce plastic. So maybe this will hopefully be my motivator to push over the line and actually write an email or a letter. So yeah, thank you very much for the excellent.
Thanks so much, Shayla. Maybe just a moment for anybody else to chip in if they want to, with a reflection, to share a head, heart, or hands. Okay, I think we might wrap it up there. I did just want to very quickly plug another event we have about this time next month, on March 19th. We have a session on better climate conversations. We're using some of the tools around active hope. One thing we've been hearing quite a lot is that all this climate stuff is really heavy and really hard, isn't it? And yes, it is. So how do you work on this stuff? How do your students work on this stuff without going a bit mad or getting a bit depressed or going out of your heads? We have a facilitator who's experiencing active hope, Anna Swisher, and she'll be facilitating a session on behalf of us. You can, if you're interested, you can sign up at that link. If you want to know more about any of our other training events or just keep in touch with GAP, we can be found on all of the important places at GAP Ireland, with the exception of X. We're not there anymore. And thanks so much for joining. If there's anything that comes up for you over the next couple of days or whenever, feel free to email me, alex@globalactionplan.ie. And yeah, please do fill out that feedback form because it's really, really helpful. And thank you so much, everyone, for your time this evening and for the really, really interesting discussion. I'm going to be going away thinking about a lot of it now as well.
Thanks, Alex, very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Alex.
Thanks a million.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Thanks, Alex. Good night.
Alicia, do you have a minute?
Yeah.
Just that in that last video part there, you sort of mentioned that was quite difficult, and I just wanted to check in with you and just make sure everything's okay and that yeah, well, just
yeah. Like crying.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of anger as well. Yes, it's very close to home. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we accept a lot of things because we need the money, because yeah, just white privilege, all of those stuff. But at the same time, it's killing us. It's doing more damage, and we're not educated enough. Like, yeah, no, there's just so much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all really shit. And
yeah. And I'm contributing to it as well because I'm shopping and buying clothes, but you're not realizing the damage and where it's going and, you know, exactly, okay, I'm taking this to the charity shop and I think I'm doing something great, but really When no one buys it in the charity shop, where is it going?